Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. And today I'm reviewing a film I just had the pleasure of revisiting with my buddy Bo. And it's a film that I hadn't seen in a while, all the way through, and I've been meaning to watch it again, especially since the star of the movie, Bruce Willis, is going to be in another movie coming out soon, so I decided to give it a watch. The movie, of course, I'm talking about is the 1997 sci-fi film directed by Luc Besson and starring alongside Bruce Willis, Gary Oldman, Ian Holm, Milla Jovovich, and Chris Tucker. The movie, of course, I'm talking about is The Fifth Element. Now, I first heard about The Fifth Element around the time it came out and didn't see it in theaters. I actually started to watch it once when it was on VHS, and I got through, I think, about a little bit around the time when the first act segues into the second act, I think. Then I turned it off. I guess my young mind, I think it was 98, just wasn't ready for the film or something, because 98 I would have been 9, so probably wasn't my cup of tea at that young age. I did think the effects looked good as a kid, but just wasn't ready for the filming and stuff, I guess also based on the trailers that were shown. Anyway, then a few years passed, I got older, I think it was 05, 06, I actually saw the film on TV, and I loved the film, and I've loved it ever since, and I've watched it a couple times sparingly, but this is the first time I've actually watched it since I got that DVD. You guys know I got the 2-disc special edition DVD. I haven't watched the special features yet. I know someone's going to go, really, you haven't watched the special features? It's true, I haven't gotten around to watching it, I'm sorry, but I look forward to watching it. Now, Luc Besson, I've heard of a few of his movies, like Leon, I've heard of, Nikita sounds familiar, Messenger of the Story of Joan of Arc, I remember the trailers for that movie, it looks like an okay movie. Arthur and the Invisibles I thought was an interesting animated movie. I haven't seen the sequels yet, and of course the other movies he's done since then I haven't seen, but based on his filmography, this is probably I don't know, this will probably be my favorite film he's done, because I think I'm probably going to like this more than Leon. But he did a good job with the direction for this film. His cinematography was pretty good. I liked the musical score by Eric Serra. It really fits the futuristic vibe, and I will say the future that's portrayed in this movie is pretty good. I mean, I like the little pop culture references, like showing McDonald's in the future. That was funny. Why don't they have serving outfits like that? Maybe a sexual harassment lawsuit. But anyway, the plot of the film is it starts in 1914 on the outbreak of World War I. Extraterrestrials known as Mondoshawans, or Shawans, I always have trouble pronouncing them. They arrive in Egypt at this ancient temple where a couple guys are doing a dig, and they collect from a secret chamber in this temple the only thing that is capable of defeating a great evil that appears in the universe every 5,000 years. The weapon consists of 4 stones, each representing one of the 4 classical elements, earth, air, fire, and water. And at the center of this weapon is a sarcophagus that contains a 5th element in the form of a human, which when combined with the power of the other 4 elements, creates a divine light that could destroy a great evil. The Mondoshawans promise their human contact, who is a priest, that they will return with the elements in time to stop the great evil, but an accident happens and he has to pass on his knowledge to the next generations, which of course we segue to the 23rd century, where the great evil has appeared in space in the form of a giant fireball that is a black fireball, and he destroys an Earth battleship in a good scene. And the President of the United States, played by, well, not the United States, the Federation, or I forget what they call it. There's something. It's basically like an amalgam, I'm guessing, of all of Earth and probably some systems nearby. But the president is Tiny Lister Jr. He listens to a request by the current priest of the Mondoshawan Key, Vito Cornelius, played by Ian Holm, and he eventually, after some finagling, agrees to help him, and they allow the Mondoshawans to come to Earth to deliver the weapon, but they're ambushed by shape-shifting aliens known as Mangalores. And Mangalores, they're outlaw, warlike beings, so they're kind of like the orcs of this movie, to use a fantasy reference. And I'll say that when you find out that they've been hunted basically in a genocidal way, you kind of feel sorry for them, but what they do throughout the movie, you don't really feel sorry for them, so it's kind of a mixed thing. They take out the Mando Shawan's ship and steal this case that we think the stones are in, and they deliver it to the main villain of the film, Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, played by Gary Oldman in a beautiful performance. Now, at the same time, they manage to recover one part of one of the Mando Shawans, and they use it to create a human clone, basically, named Lilu, who is Jovovich's character. She's kind of terrified, and she escapes, and she lands in the cab of our main character, who we were introduced to before all this, in a small scene, Korben Dallas, played by Bruce Willis, who, as we find out, is a former major in the Special Forces. Now, Dallas saves her from something, and he delivers Lilo to Cornelius, and from here, it's basically kind of a race to get the stones. Of course, it's a weird thing. The government reinstates Dallas to go get the stones. Lilo, Cornelius, and Cornelius' apprentice David are off trying to get the stones. They converge at a point. Baptiste is trying to get the stones with one of his own guys, and then eventually himself. While at the same time, the Mangalores are getting them to try to get leverage with Zorg because he finagled on a deal that they made for their first thing. So it's kind of a race thing that leads into the climax. We get a good action sequence at in the beginning part of the third act where we see typical Bruce Willis, you know, some one-liners, which he says one of my favorite lines in the movie. Anyone else want to negotiate? I'm not going to spoil the context of the line, but those of you who've seen the movie, you know what context it's in. And of course, one of my second favorite line is said earlier in the movie. Now, lady, I only speak two languages, English and bad English. And I'm not going to spoil the ending of the movie and what the fifth element actually is, but if you think about it and how they kind of give hints throughout the movie what it's going to be, and even though they don't state out right what it is, some people might find the fifth element to be a little corny what it actually is, but I don't mind it. Really, I don't mind it. It kind of harkens back to the whole fairy tale aspect if you think about it, but it makes sense a little bit, especially if your goal is to protect life. It would make sense that this would be the fifth element. Acting-wise, Bruce Willis, he's on top of his game in this acting, you know. He does some subtle stuff at the beginning, and his character's kind of a smart ass at times. Kind of looks at negative things because of his wife leaving him, and he got a nagging mother, which I don't know for sure, but I heard that it was that it was Bruce Willis's then wife, Demi Moore, who did it, but I don't know if that's true or not. Kind of sounds like it would be. If it is, it's a funny little reference. But Willis, like I mentioned, he does a good job in the role, and I do like that he goes a little over the top during the action sequences. It's not like so much like, I wouldn't say it's like how he is in the Die Hard films, but you see Bruce Willis kicking ass, and in a movie with action elements, that's all you can ask of him, other than his acting, of course. Milla Jovovich as Lilu, to be all honest, of the movies I've seen her in, this is probably my favorite performance of hers, because the only other things I have to compare it to are her performances in the Resident Evil films, which I'll say her best performance is in the first one, in all honesty. And of course, even though I haven't seen it from the very beginning, the parts of A Fourth Kind that I've seen, which I do actually want to watch that movie all the way through so I can judge it fairly. But I didn't really mind her here. Maybe it's because she doesn't speak English at first, but for the fake language that she's speaking, she does a pretty good job with, which I know she and the director created it, and it's an interesting language. And her as Lilu, she was pretty good. She was into character too, and I will say I actually like the romance that develops between Dallas and Lilu. It's believable with how it develops, especially considering that before they even show Lilu, Willis brings up he wants a perfect woman, and in the context of the story, Lilu is supposed to be a perfect being, so kind of a little funny thing there. And you believe them as friends at first, but then as it goes on, you believe their romance. It's a little quick, like usually fairy tale romances are, but I buy it. Gary Oldman is Zorg, perfect casting as the villain. He was so into character in this movie. Now, some people will complain that sometimes he has a tendency to overact, but that's how into character he gets, and for this character, he does have a little moments that might border on overacting, but with how the character is written and in the context of the scenes, I think it makes sense. Like, most of the scenes, like one scene that comes to mind It's mostly when Zorg is pissed off, like when he sees he doesn't have the stones both times. Like when he's yelling at the Mangalores because they didn't deliver the stones. It's a little over the top there, but it fits the context because he's being hired by the darkness and he doesn't have the stones. He's going to be in big trouble. And Gary Oldman's always good with the accents he does, and kind of has like a southern type of accent to it without it being stereotypical, so it worked. And how the character was written is fun, villain character. It's with how Oldman gets into character and how good an actor he is. I am very surprised it took so long for him to get an Oscar nomination. He only got nominated for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I still have to watch, but I really wish he would have been nominated earlier. Like, I think he should have been nominated for Dracula. He should have been nominated for this movie, but alas, he wasn't. I'm surprised they didn't nominate him for Batman as well, but that's just me. Charlie Creed Miles as David. Okay, this is the only movie he has known. Ian Holm as Father Vito Cornelius. He does a pretty good job. Ian Holm's always good to watch. He's one of my favorite actors. I don't know if I put him in the top 10 of my favorite actors, but he's a good actor. He's one of my favorite actors. Of course, you all know what else he's been in. The Hobbit, Alien, the beginning of The Hobbit, I should say. The Frankenstein movie that Kenneth Branagh directed. Those are the ones that come to mind off the top of my head. But as Cornelius, I have to say, Bilbo Baggins and Cornelius show him when he's being a more human type character, because as Ash, he's a human type character until, of course, the plot twist, but you can tell there's something very off about him. He's not as overt the fact that he's an android as Bishop is, but it's overt as him. So as Vito and as Bilbo, seeing him play a more human-like character, even though Bilbo's not a human, he's a hobbit, but I think you get my point. He does a pretty good job, and I do like the fact that it does show how he is devoted to his religion when he prays for forgiveness for hitting Korben. Chris Tucker is Ruby Rod. Here's a performance that people usually have a problem with, but I think it's I think it stems more from how the character is written and how Tucker interpreted it. Because what an actor is supposed to do when they look at the script and develop their character is supposed to be their interpretation of how the character is written in the script while being faithful to the script. Now Tucker, most of the movies that he's done, he's usually like a loud character. This probably being his loudest, because I don't remember him being as loud as he is as Ruby Rod in the Rush Hour movies. And of course in Friday, which is probably my favorite movie he's in. He's not really that loud except for a few scenes, but he's not as loud. In this movie, he could border on being annoying at times, mostly in the action sequences, but he's kind of obnoxious in the other sequences, like when he's doing the DJ thing. But I can see why he would turn some people off, but it doesn't really bother me. If there's anyone who kind of overacts too much in the movie, it's probably him, but in the context of the scene, it kind of seems right for the character, like when he's doing the bomb thing. 3, 2, 1. No, man, I said it wrong. It was like 7, 8, 9. Where it's like a cry over the top thing on the end of the movie. What's the matter with you? Every 5 minutes is always a bomb or something. I chuckle at it. Some people might find it annoying, but it's cool to each their own. Tiny Lister Jr. as the president, I thought was a good casting choice. Same thing with Brian James as General Monroe. Very good. They're only in a handful of scenes, but I do like their characters and also how their characters are edited in a few times. Especially my favorite moment of them being edited in is probably involved in that line I mentioned earlier. Anyone else want to negotiate? Why did you learn to negotiate like that? I wonder. Now, I'm not going to bring up the rest of the cast members because that's the principal cast members. The rest of the cast do pretty good jobs. Nothing of note enough to bring up. They fit them, and like I mentioned before, I do like the design of this futuristic world. Like seeing like how planes that travel from planet to planet, how they'd have to be cleaned off of alien gunk. Just seeing them using nuclear energy as the fuel source. Which if I will say, if we could find a way to do it like they do it in the movie, it'd probably solve our fuel problems, but no one's going to probably pay the money to invest in it until oil's already gone. Alas, greed. But I don't know what else to say about this movie. It's a good movie. Oh yeah, one thing I haven't touched on. The visual effects. This is just based on what I see in the movie, but based on what I see in the movie, this is how you mesh practical effects with CGI the right way. You don't do practical effects and then spam the CGI over it. You don't use CGI and then put a little bit of practical in it. The key part of the effect should be the practical effect, and the CGI should be for touch-up. Because in this movie, all the stuff looks like practical effects touched up with some CGI maybe to make it seem to flow a little bit, and also some CGI for stuff that'd be kind of hard to do practically, like a Mangalore shaking his head and then slowly turning back to his normal head, or a body slowly building itself. You could have probably done that with stop motion, but with CGI, I don't mind it, especially for this time period in film history. But for like the car sequences, the spaceship stuff, the gun stuff, excellent use of practical effects. I like that the Mangalores are also people in suits. I really do miss that. I know like some of the films, like the AVP films and stuff, use it at points, but I really do miss it in films. Like, I actually have a horror movie idea, which maybe one day I'll talk about in a video, but I know that if it ever got made, I would insist on practical effects if the movie was made, because if they spammed it with CGI, it'd probably kill the film. But anyway, my rating for Fifth Element is 5 out of 5, because I don't really have any major problems with the movie. Like I said, Chris Tucker could be minorly annoying, but it doesn't bother me. As you can tell, this is a film I highly recommend that you check out. And I have to say, it did deserve the Academy Award nomination it got. Alas, it wasn't for Best Visual Effects, which I think it got robbed of that nomination. It got nominated for Sound Editing, and it lost to Titanic. But I'm glad it won a Visual Effects Award for the BAFTA.